Right, so we're joined for this particular segment by a gentleman who has been a writer for Barstool Sports and he's written multiple books. The latest book is called Six Rings, the Super Bowl history of your New England Patriots. Now, while things aren't all rosy at Gillette Stadium these days, uh, Jerry Thornton it writes about the history of when times were good. Jerry, welcome to the conversation, my friend.
Blogger, author, stand-up comedian, close personal friend of Kevin Tachi's. Hero? That's your word. You use that word, not me. I don't feel I'm at all a hero, Kevin. I'm just a guy who likes to burp the alphabet into a keyboard and produce coherent sentences, hopefully, some of the time when I have an editor. But yeah, it's great to talk to you again. Great to see you. It's been too long.
So, cape or no cape?
Yeah.
Hero?
No, I would prefer a cape, but I think I'm more like The Incredibles. No capes.
No capes.
Caps are dangerous. If I did wear a cape, it would be the kind like distinguished gentlemen wear, like just over the shoulders, top hat, tail, which I do every night after 6 o'clock because I'm not a farmer.
Good call.
Yeah, exactly. Change into my formal wear for the evening, but I'm still never going to be you, Kevin, as much as I aspire to be.
Well, we know that you've written 2 previous books. If you'll share with the folks, what were the titles of those fantastic books?
I wrote my first one about the early, terrible, ridiculous days of irrelevance for the Patriots franchise, called From Darkness to Dynasty. Sold well. The publishers were really pleased and reapproached me about another idea, and they just pitched it. Here's the title, 5 Rings. So 5 Rings came out in the fall, September of 2018. And this being the New England Patriots, they turned that title obsolete in 5 months, which is a first world problem to have, believe me. As much as it felt incomplete at that point, I could have written a book about the Jets in 1970 and called it One Ring, and it would still be relevant today. Some Detroit writer could have written No Rings about the Lions, and it would be evergreen. But it was a desire of mine to finish it, and the perfect jumping off point seemed to be when Brady left. I mean, it still says the Super Bowl history of the New England Patriots so far in parentheses, and I stand by that. I'm not about to declare this over, but without question, when Brady left, it was this perfect kind of bracket of where it began, how it ended, and in between is, I think, one of the most remarkable stories, not just in sports, definitely in sports, but I really just think in American pop culture. I don't think there's ever been an institution quite like this franchise who went from extreme irrelevance for 40 years. Even the times where they were successful, it was short-lived. Like twice, they had coaches on really good teams pull a complete nutty and leave while they were under contract. Chuck Fairbanks in 1978, Bill Parcells 18 years later. In between, they were just, their local games were often blacked out on TV. I would go there as a kid and there'd be 30,000 people in the stands, and you're wondering if they'd even be there next year or if they'd move to some other city. So they break through in 2001. They go from irrelevant to America's sweetheart that lasted for about a day and a half. And then at some point, the country learned to despise this team in ways that the likes of which I've never seen. So it's it's the dynasty, but it's not all just the rah-rah stuff. It's the scandals, real and imagined. It's the way the league reacted to this team, how they have literally changed rules that the Patriots were able to take advantage of in ways that other people didn't, just to try to derail them, and it didn't work. And this success is impossible to sustain the way they have sustained it for 2 full decades. And it was a joy to tell the story and have some laughs along the way.
So how easy was it to take 5 rings and then add the 6th ring? And did it give you an opportunity to tweak anything? Because I feel that anytime you may put something together, any project, whether it's video, audio, or if you take the time to write a book, there's always a couple of things that you always say, if I had an opportunity, I would tweak this, or I might tweak that.
It was more a matter of, okay, now that we know that Brady is gone, like how that relates to the rest of the story. Because, the talk about how's it going to end for him has been so prevalent for more than just last year. I mean, it has gone back. Since From Darkness to Dynasty came out in 2014, I can't tell you how many appearances I've done, which are fun. I enjoy getting in front of a crowd and talking about these projects and hearing from them and getting feedback from Patriots fans and so on. And it's always come up 100% of the time. What do you think is going on? How do you think it's going to end? And well, we finally know. And it's about going back now with the benefit of hindsight and try to figure out exactly when was the genesis of him deciding he had had enough and was not going to sign here at any price. So that's an element in there. And even though we were living it, we weren't privy to everything that was going on behind the scenes. And I think now we can see the obvious signs that were there.
Taking a look at the modern day Patriots, aside from the book, how do you feel about this current team as it's constructed? Do you feel that it could be some time before there's a 7th ring edition?
It certainly feels that way when they're 2-5, but when you really look at the nuts and bolts of this, and nobody likes excuses, least of all the guy in charge of this whole thing, Bill Belichick, my close personal friend and spirit animal, who has been accused of doing exactly that. You look at the sum total of it. This team was in a good position. They had the number 1 defense in the league last year. They had a quarterback who's had success in this league more recently than a lot of celebrated quarterbacks. I mean, Cam Newton won an MVP more recently than Aaron Rodgers or Drew Brees. He won a Super Bowl more recently than Russell Wilson. So they looked like they were in fairly good shape. And then the opt-outs come, and they got whacked harder than any other team. They lost 8 guys, including 2 of their key starters on defense. Their right tackle, who's one among the better at his position in the league. Then but they have a good camp. They have a good start to the year. The offense looks like it has been able to take what they have and morph itself into something that's going to really be something to be reckoned with. And then Newton comes down with the vid. And then Stephon Gilmore comes down with the vid. I mean, really, your most important player on either side of the ball. They shut down the facility for the better part of 2 weeks, and unsurprisingly, drop a couple of games where they're just not competitive. But prior to that, I mean, they lose on the goal line at Seattle. Seattle's one of the better teams in the league. Brian Hoyer has a couple of brain cramps in the red zone. Otherwise, we're looking at maybe a chance to steal a game at Kansas City. So you look at the sum total of it. Yeah, they had a couple of terrible games, and they've made uncharacteristic mistakes. Still, you're 2-5. I mean, I'm not saying that their record should be some other thing. You don't get credit for trying. But I think they're not in terrible shape. Their salary cap next year opens wide open. They're among the top teams in the league in terms of space, when a lot of teams are going to be cutting back. So if nothing else, I'm fascinated to see how this is all playing out, whether they can right the ship and what they're going to look like next year. I'm along for the ride. This losing is terrible. They haven't had single digit win total since 2002. If you remember the last time they lost, they won fewer than 10 games, congratulations, you just voted for the first time. That's how insane the success has been. And I'm not saying that it's done. I refuse to.
As you mentioned, besides you talking about the book, you also write for Barstool Sports. How often are you writing about the Patriots and what's going on with the team itself, or is it other things that Barstool has you?
The Patriots are my primary focus, and I'm blessed to have that. I mean, my heart goes out to my coworkers that, you know, whose specialty, their passion, if you will, was like college basketball, and that got shut down just before the tournament was about to begin. You know, baseball went dark for so long, and the Patriots, bless them, good, bad, otherwise, can't go 2 days without being the top story on all the morning sports cable networks. And so it's been busy. It really has. And I also am pleased to say that the Patriots generate a lot of interest on Barstool, and to have this be my job, to focus on this, writing for readers who respond to it, and for a company that respects and appreciates that the job I'm doing, it's a blessing. I mean, I never saw that this was going to be my future back when I was posting nonsense on like a Patriots message board. Yeah, you know, that my brother was the admin on, and like I never thought I could turn this into a livelihood. Never forget, Kevin, there's someone out there whose job it is to write about the Utah Jazz, you know, the Cincinnati Bearcats or the Southern Illinois Salukis, and the Patriots are front and center of the sports universe for the entire time I've been writing for this company. So knock wood, it keeps going.
Yeah, and if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Jerry Thornton, author of Six Rings, also writer for, that's right, the Super Bowl history of the New England Patriots. Also writes for Barstool Sports, and as he says, comedian, stand-up comedian. When did you first get contacted by the publisher? How long did it take you to put this particular book together? Were you doing it during COVID or prior to that?
Yeah, I was COVID for sure. You know, the whole way it began with From Darkness to Dynasty was I heard from a literary agent in Manhattan, writer's house, and this guy he's originally a Massachusetts guy, and asked if I'd ever be interested in writing a book, and I was like, yeah, I've always thought about that, and I said, I actually have this one that I've always wanted to read, and the universe has not been getting around to doing it. So maybe I'll be the one to write it. I told them the whole thing about the crazy stories of the Patriots from my youth, that, you know, some of them I lived, some of them were just kind of like, you know, an oral history or whatever, the stories that my older brothers told me or whatever, and other things I had researched. And I thought, you know, there's really an interesting story to all this. And so, yeah, it sold in a matter of days. It took me years to write, because I would sort of put it aside for a while and then, you know, come back to it. And, you know, I'd go to a bookstore and I just had this weird kind of sadness to me, like, oh, all these other people finish their books. It's a lot of work, but I really should finish mine. And then when it was done and I first saw it on the shelves of a store, it was like mind-boggling, Kevin. I'm like, just, you know, I'm like, look at all these people in here buying books. Yeah, you know, I'm Oprah. You have a book. You're buying a book. Buy this book. And it's fun, you know, because you can write a million blogs. But remember the movie The Social Network?
I do.
About Facebook? Yeah. The Justin Timberlake character tells the Jeffrey Eisenberg character, he says, you know, a guy can go fishing and catch like 100 trout, but what's the one that he takes a picture with? It's the big marlin. No one takes a picture of himself with a bunch of trout. Like, you want that big score. And so the book is my metaphorical big fish that I was able to land. And then the second one was also another labor of love, and I'm happy to update it at this time more than anything, where I think people need to read some positive stuff with everything going on in the world and with the Patriots. And I think I hopefully captured that.
Compared to 5 rings, 6 rings, was there a bittersweet moment knowing that all the things we were questioning, when is this ride going to end, you had to spell that out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, all of last year, all of 2019, which, when I look back at it now, and I was optimistic that Brady would sign, and you realize now the whole year was like, we're at the dinner table, and it's like Brady saying, Jerry, would you mind passing the salt, and could you explain, ask Bill to why I'm have no one to throw to and there's no tight ends. And then Bill's like, Jerry, can you ask Tom how come he, is taking, he's throwing the ball away on 3rd down when we've got open guys or whatever. And at some point you just shut up, you two. Either come together and reconcile your differences, have your makeup sex, or just go to counseling or break up. But we can't keep living like this. And I think Brady would be miserable if he were still here. And I have it on good authority that the organization, there are people in the organization who are really angry about his general demeanor and lack of cooperation last year. That he was moping around, he wouldn't do those extra things, the little videos and the stuff to help out the team, the stuff that he's doing routinely down in Tampa, and they're feeling a little jaded. And so am I, frankly. It's a little part of me that's just like, oh, really? You're all happy down there now, huh? Oh, really? How's your new fan base? You really like them, huh? Oh, they're so nice down there. What about us? We've got universities. What do they have? Waffle houses, like nudie bars and strip malls. Cash for gold places. Like, how about you just cared for us a little bit more? But I'll get over it.
But that's got to be frustrating as a Patriots fan, and that had to have been something that was in your head as you're writing this, where you try to be the neutral person, but in your head you're like going, "Yeah, you can tell he was angry, seeing how you're right, how he's acting, and how he's all." Although we've seen a little bit of angry Tom on the sidelines during some of the Tampa Bay games when he's not, hitting his guys, or he's thrown an interception earlier on in the season. How do you feel that people are feeling around New England? Is the fan base torn, where some of them are like, yeah, I'm on board with Brady and Gronk, who he took down there with him, or like, you know what, screw Tom?
Yeah, it's all over the map. I think it is in a divided America, the issue of the day that truly divides us the most is this very question that you have just put your finger on. I got a guy I grew up with, who shows up at a cookout with a brand new Buccaneers hat that still had the sticker, the little rainbow sticker on there, whatever.
The official sticker.
Yeah, the one that glows like a prism, the word I'm looking for. But anyway, he's like, I don't care if the Patriots ever win another game. I'm totally on Team Brady. And my oldest brother, who was the first guy I knew to be on Team Brady back in 2001, did not want Bledsoe back under center. He was sold on this guy in a couple of games. He has changed Brady's name to a first name that begins with the letter F. I think, going with that, he's just so embittered. And I'm going back and forth. I really was, it's my nature to root against the guy who leaves. You know what I mean? No matter how amicable a breakup is, I think we're all wired at some primordial level to hope that our ex puts on 50 pounds, stops shaving, he just wears a bathrobe all day and whatever, and that we come out great, And instead, Brady's Instagramming his workout videos, and he's at the beach with his new boyfriend, holding his heart around the sun like that, living his best life. There's no question. He's over the moon happy. Even those times when he's slamming his helmet or whatever, that's the competitive nature in him. And it's really hard to watch the. He went to the franchise that has the worst winning percentage in the history of football, and with his mere presence and his arm has turned them into a winner overnight. And those mistakes that they were making early in the year, because I was saying they're the most undisciplined team in football, have started to go away. And now it's the Patriots that are making the unforgivable, like, blockhead mistakes. And it's hard to deal with. I'm trying not to hold it against Brady. I know eventually he'll come back and retire as a Patriot and it'll all be wonderful. But the way he's looking now, he's got lots of great football ahead of him, and they didn't keep him. Like he could be under center for this team right now if they had done things differently. It's a tough thing to swallow. It really is.
I'm going to use a rock and roll analogy, and that is if anybody was a fan of Van Halen, when Van Halen started out, their lead singer was David Lee Roth, and then the band split from David, and you had Sammy Hagar. It's the same thing I feel with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. Which path do you go? And I mean, would you still feel as a fan that you are still Team Belichick? Do you feel that if he's able to find a decent QB and somebody who has the traits of Brady, that this team could be back on the same track it was when we had Tom Brady?
Yeah, I'm on Team Belichick all the way. And you're right about Van Halen. I was in college then with some guys who were real, like, headbangers, really into that kind of music. And I remember them trying to justify, like, hey man, at least the band's going to be like partying together now, because Roth was like totally against everybody else and stuff, What's that song by Bowling for Soup, 1985? And who's that other guy who's singing in Van Halen? But anyway, yeah, I'm on Team Belichick. And look, snapshot of it right now doesn't look great. And the Sharks are smelling blood in the water, and they are trying to circle around him, and they're trying to attack him and say, see, this proves that he doesn't know what he's doing or whatever. There's not a person who has ever walked the earth, not a member of the human race or our ancestors or whatever, that I would rather have in charge of this situation right now. As bad as it looks at the moment, he built this team from nothing. He did it once in Cleveland, and I know people love to say, "Oh, that Cleveland team, that was a failure." He had that team built. His front office, his coaching staff was a star chamber of the smartest football minds in the world. Guys like Nick Saban and Scott Pioli and some guys I don't care for much, like Eric Mangini or whatever. But like Jim Schwartz, all those guys, he had built that, and goes to the playoffs, beats the Patriots in the playoffs with Bill Parcells, poised to continue that success. And then the owner announces in the middle of the year that he's moving to Baltimore, and things just went sideways. He's built two franchises. He can rebuild this one, and it's not like it's a complete disaster. You know what I mean? It's not like there's no talent anywhere to be had on here. The secondary is still solid. The offensive line is good. They've added some young pieces that I'm anxious to see how they are going forward. There were mistakes building the roster this year for sure. They were hamstrung in terms of the salary cap. But yeah, I'm optimistic on this future. If I was buying stock in this team, I would do a total buy order right now for 2021.
And if you're just tuned in, we're speaking with author Jerry Thornton, talking about 6 rings, the Super Bowl history of the New England Patriots. We have just a couple of minutes left here. Knowing you get COVID-19, and a guy is an author, you want to get out there, you want to do book signings and bookstores, you want to go to the libraries and talk about your book. Are you going to be able to do that with COVID-19 being so relevant? Or what are some of the ways folks can be able to hear you and talk about the book?
Yeah. You can check me every day on Barstool. I'm on Twitter at Jerry Thornton 1, Jerry spelled with a J. I would love to go and do these appearances. I just don't think anyone's doing them at the moment. I mean, listen, I have my first comedy show this Saturday down the Cape, the first one since the world came to an end back in March. So I think we're starting to figure these things out, like how to have events where people just kind of stay apart or whatever. So anything that I'm doing, I will post on Twitter, and I'll try to plug on Barstool because I love it. The whole thing about this team, Kevin, and the reaction that we were talking about to the rest of the country about this team and calling them cheaters and trying to discredit everything that they did, taking draft picks away, changing the rules, has had this effect of galvanizing Patriots fans. Like, I think I've seen other fan bases that of successful teams get sort of complacent. What I call the Yankee fanification of the teams, like where the success just kind of doesn't mean as much. And I think what they've done is turn us paranoid. But just because you're paranoid doesn't mean people aren't actually out to get you. And it's been great. So I go to these events and people are fired up, young and old. A great story too. I went to one where this older gentleman wanted to ask a question, and he said he used to work for the NFL. He worked the sidelines at the old stadium. And I could tell he was legit because he was wearing like 90s clothes, like starter jacket and, with Patriots gear on it. And he told me that for the Snow Bowl game, the last and the greatest game ever played in the old stadium, when the tuck rule play happened and the refs gave the balls back to the Patriots, he said they put the ball in the wrong spot because it was now an incomplete pass. So we had to tell him, wait, before you play, the ball is 5 yards up, the original line of scrimmage. You've got it where they recover the fumble, and the ref said, oh my gosh, you're right. Okay. So he fixes it. Vinatieri's kick, which was 2 plays later, was good by 3 yards. This guy moved the ball up 5 yards to where it belongs. I said, dude, you're Forrest Gump. Like, this is a brush with greatness. You were there, a part of history, and then the famous snowplow game. The guy said, the snowplow that went on the field, you know who drove it? I go, yeah, I should know this, but I know his name is Mark Henderson. The guy said, do you know where he was from? I go, yes, he was on work release from Walpole Prison. The guy said, do you know what he was in jail for? I go, okay, now you've got me stumped. He goes, he broke into my house. I'm like, what the hell? This is amazing. So I love that interaction. I love going and talking to people that have different stories and people who say, look, I would, my dad took me to games when I was little back in that old terrible stadium. And, when they won the Super Bowl, I was crying real tears thinking about him. Like, I've made friends out of this process. So that's a long-winded way of me saying I want nothing more than to be able to get back out there and talk to people. I'll do it outside if we have to. I'll do it in a parking lot. Let's just talk Patriots and try to relive as much of the good times as we possibly can.
As we say goodbye and wrap up, where can folks be able to get your book? Can they get it online?
Yes.
Amazon? Can they get it Barnes and Nobles? Where?
It's available on Amazon, and it will be where fine books are sold. Your Barnes and Nobles, and I've gotten a great support from the first 2 books from your independent booksellers. So, who have done really well in a down economy for a lot of businesses. Like, everyone thought, oh well, Amazon's going to put them out of business. No, and people are passionate about books and want to understand that sports is kind of the language that we all speak. It's the watering hole where the whole human animal kingdom gathers, and that I think the Patriots have been the driving force behind the NFL being the America's most popular thing that we have, and they have been front and center of the middle of the galaxy of pro football. And this story is remarkable in so many aspects, and going through it all and the sum total of it has been it was nostalgic, a nostalgic trip for me, but it was also something that really was from the heart. And if I couldn't tell it in ways that are funny, I wouldn't have even bothered, but I think there's a lot of laughs to be had along the way.
He is Jerry Thornton, author of the new book, 6 Rings, the Super Bowl history of the New England Patriots in fine stores near you. Also online at Amazon. Check for where fine books are sold. Jerry, thank you again for joining us.
Kevin, thanks very much. And best of luck to everybody in Abington. Go Green Wave.